Have you ever been obsessed with something, as I was, without getting any benefit from it? My obsession was the thought of exposing my wife as soon as possible. However, I was missing the most obvious details that lay on the surface. It seems to me that if I had noticed these things earlier, I would not have had to suffer such serious consequences after another grueling day at work. I drove home that evening, hoping for some quiet time in the company of my wife, Emily. Driving the last few blocks, the streets sparkled with evening lights. I expected to see Emily's warm smile and enjoy a candle at dinner. This small but important ritual reminded us of our early dates from time to time. As I entered the house, I smelled the scent of her favorite fragrance mixed with the smell of freshly cooked dinner. Nothing out of the ordinary seemed to happen that evening. We sat around the table, exchanging the news of the day, sharing small joys and disappointments. Emily's voice sounded as melodious as ever, her gaze filled with warmth and care. After dinner, we moved to the living room to have a cup of tea and watch the new TV series that had become our new little obsession. Emotions flashed across the screen, but I noticed Emily's gaze wandering somewhere else. A vague unease swept over me, but I brushed it aside, thinking it might just be fatigue from the day's work. That evening was filled with the familiar comfort of our home. I treasured those moments of calm and intimacy. At that moment, I was just enjoying a peaceful evening spent together, not realizing how soon things would change as the evening transitioned into night, our conversation becoming more intimate and deeper. Emily suddenly fell silent. I noticed a tinge of seriousness in her eyes that usually only appeared for good reason. It was clear that she wanted to share something meaningful that she had been holding in for a long time. My first reaction was to want to support her. In our relationship, we had always tried to be open and honest. "Michael," she began, and I felt my heart race in anticipation. "I have something to tell you. I've been thinking about it for a long time, and I've come to the conclusion that I can't hide it anymore." She said it so firmly that I realized the conversation was going to be serious. Such words often preceded something unpleasant. "Yes, dear, I'm listening," I replied, trying to show attention. "Just don't think this is about you," she began after a short pause. "I want to explore myself more, but because of our marriage, I can't do that. Do you understand?" "I don't know what you mean," I asked sincerely, not understanding what she meant. "I want something different," she tried to hint. "You want to revitalize our sex life?" I asked. "No, I want to try something new with another man," she said bluntly, and I was left stunned, not knowing how to react to such a revelation. It was unexpected, especially considering we'd been together for 6 years. My emotions quickly shifted. I became more serious, and with the same expression on my face, I asked, "Do you want to have sex with another man?" I asked the question very abruptly. I saw Emily begin to hesitate, her eyes running from side to side. "No," she blurted out, "I was joking, honey. It was just a joke." I completely misunderstood her joke and really couldn't understand what had just happened. So I decided to ask a clarifying question. "Honestly, do you have someone besides me?" "No, what makes you think that?" she asked. "Then what's the point of this whole conversation?" I asked. My nerves were on edge. I had absolutely no idea what to do, and it all seemed strange to me. Emily got up from the couch and headed to the bathroom, leaving me alone. A couple minutes later, Emily appeared in front of me in her robe. She walked over to me and whispered right in my ear, "Honey, I'm not wearing panties." At that moment, I realized her intent. Emily must have wanted to provoke me so that she could then engage in passionate intimacy. That's what I thought at the time, so I relaxed, picked her up, and we started at the kitchen table and ended the evening in the bedroom. After that, we never revisited that strange conversation again. A couple weeks went by. With each passing day, my anxiety only increased. I began to notice subtle changes in Emily's behavior. They used to seem insignificant to me. Now every phone call she made, every time she went to another room, every time she was late from work, I became suspicious. I used to trust my wife completely, but now it seemed to me that she was hiding something. I decided to talk to her about it, hoping that an honest conversation would help dispel my doubts, or at least realize what was really going on. "Emily," I began one evening as we sat in the living room. "I feel like something has changed between us. You seem distracted. Is there something you'd like to tell me?" She looked at me puzzled, then answered with a slight smile, "Michael, I'm just tired from work." "Don't worry so much. It's fine." But my doubts didn't go away. I began to pay attention to details. Unexpected delays after work, new habits that seemed strange to me. For example, she started showering more often when she got home late, or going to the bathroom with her phone, which she hadn't done before. All of this made me think about starting to keep track of her movements. I didn't see the point in hiring a private investigator because I thought I could handle it myself. I started noting the time she left and came home. I checked her social media posts, sometimes even tried to subtly find out who she was with during the day or evening. Nothing suspicious came up in her messages. She didn't give me any reason to worry, but strangely, it only increased my anxiety. This conversation, when she mentioned wanting novelty, resounded in my mind. My doubts and insecurities were growing by the day, and I decided it was time to act more decisively for my own peace of mind. One day I began to follow her movements more closely when she told me she was running late at work. I decided to put her word to the test. I parked my car a few blocks from her office and walked closer to see if she would come out accompanied by someone. Standing in the shadows, I felt like a character from a cheap detective novel, but the tingle in my heart reminded me that this was my reality, not fiction. After about an hour of waiting, I saw Emily coming out alone. My relief was short-lived. Just a few minutes later, a yellow Chevrolet Camaro pulled up and a man much older than Emily and I got out. They hugged and my heart stopped. I couldn't hear them talking, but their body language spoke volumes. Emily touched the man's hands, then they shared a passionate kiss. They laughed and got into the car. I was left standing in the dark, trying to gather my thoughts. Realizing I had screwed up by not capturing video or photos as evidence, I headed home. Questions rushed through my mind. Should I confront Emily now or gather more evidence? Could I trust her at all? What does this mean for our future? I got home, and about an hour and a half later, Emily returned as well, heading straight for the shower. I realized that talking to her right now was pointless since I had no proof. So I installed a tracking app on her phone, justifying my actions by wanting to protect our future. For the first few days after installing the tracking app, I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. But as time went on, notifications began to confirm my worst fears. Emily was spending time in places she hadn't told me about and seemed to be trying to hide these encounters from me. The day after this notification, I decided to follow her. My fears were confirmed when I saw her meeting with the same man. They seemed happy and relaxed together, which was a blow to me. On the way back, I videotaped their meeting, feeling a mixture of anger, betrayal, and dashed hopes. I pondered what to do with this evidence. On the one hand, I wanted to confront Emily and demand an explanation. On the other hand, I was afraid of destroying what was left of our relationship. I hired a private investigator to gather more evidence. At the same time, I tried to maintain my normal routine and not arouse Emily's suspicions. I didn't want to find myself in the role of a cheating husband, so I planned to prepare a really tough surprise for Emily. The private investigator worked for 3 weeks and gave me all the information about my wife's meetings with this suspicious man, who turned out to be Randy Campbell, a powerful man with his own business unrelated to my wife's work. It remained a mystery to me how and under what circumstances Emily met this man. Thanks to a private investigator, I learned that every Saturday Emily stayed at a 4-star hotel with her lover, and they spent at least 2 hours there. I also knew their room number. It was the luxury suite number 305. On Thursday, I asked my close friend, to whom I explained the whole situation, to check into the same hotel and room 305, paying him to do so. Since each room in this hotel had its own key card, my friend accidentally lost it the next day, Friday, and paid a small fine for it, which I of course reimbursed him for. As a result, on Friday I had a key card for room 305, the very room where my wife used to spend time with her lover. Sleep was hard to come by on Friday night, but surprisingly, I woke up the next day alert and full of energy. Emily went to work early in the morning, as usual. She was already being followed by the private investigator I had hired for the day. Since I had taken the day off in advance, I drove to the hotel in the afternoon. I had originally planned to book room 304, but decided to check with the receptionist about room 305 first. I was informed that it was booked for today. I sincerely hoped it was my wife and her lover who had reserved it. In the evening, I received a text message from Emily, "Honey, I'm going to be late tonight, so don't wait up for me." I replied, "No problem." I then called my detective, who informed me that my wife had left the building and gotten into a cab that was apparently headed to the hotel. I was surprised that she was alone, but at this point I had already decided to act. I left my room and entered room 305. I placed a bottle of wine and 2 glasses on the table and a gorgeous bouquet of flowers on the bed. As I sat waiting, my hands and legs were shaking in anticipation of the upcoming meeting, but I knew it was necessary. 40 minutes later, Emily arrived at the hotel. She was alone. I asked the detective to keep an eye out to let me know immediately if she saw Randy Campbell. I heard Emily walk to the door and activate her key card. The door clicked open and she stepped inside, looking beautiful and independent. "You know, I think I understand what you meant about examining yourself and how our marriage is getting in the way of you," I said, pausing. At that moment, Emily's cell phone slipped out of her hands. She clearly didn't expect to see me here. I continued, "But I don't understand why you haven't told me everything that's going on with you." That night, Emily stood silent, as if paralyzed. She looked at me, and I could see her trembling. She was scared, which amused me even more. I walked over to Emily and took her phone and put it in my pocket. "What are you doing here?" she blurted out. "You think you can cheat on me and I won't notice?" I asked. "No, darling, what are you saying?" She replied, suddenly revitalized. She wanted to approach me, but I backed away. "Let's talk things over. Sit down," I suggested, and she sat down at the table. I opened a bottle of wine, poured us some, and decided to ask, "Can you tell me how many times you had sex with Mr. Campbell?" "We haven't had sex here," she quickly replied, but I silently sat down across from her and continued. "Did you enjoy having sex with him?" "Please stop," she said nervously. At this point, I pulled out my phone and turned on a recording that showed Emily moaning and begging her lover not to stop. You're telling me to stop, but you're asking Mr. Campbell to keep going," I said. "I don't understand what you want," she continued to resist, looking like a mouse caught in a cage and not about to give up. "I just can't figure out if you came here alone and if your lover is supposed to arrive soon. If you came here alone and no one forced you, then that's your choice, isn't it?" I asked, seeing Emily struggle with tension. "I cheated on you, but that doesn't mean anything. I'll stay with you," she said bluntly. "You're going to stay with me. What makes you think we'll be together after this?" I asked. "You don't love me," she asked. "What does that have to do with what we're talking about?" "We're talking about something completely different," I said, raising my voice. "If you love me, you'll forgive me," she said bluntly. I laughed right in front of her. It sounded so absurd, it was even funny. "You're arguing like a little kid. We're adults, and I want to have a normal conversation with you. Do you realize you've gone about it the wrong way? Or maybe you've been having some problems lately? We've been talking less because you've been busy with your love affairs and I've been busy looking after you," I said. At that moment, I got a notification on my phone. I ignored the notification on my phone and continued the conversation. "You are struggling right now, and it's unclear what you are hoping for. I want to save our marriage and help you, but you're forcing me to resort to manipulation. I want to understand why you cheated on me." "I'm not cheating on you," she said loudly. "You're messing with me." But then I noticed Emily's eyes. They were unusual, red, and clearly not from fatigue. I realized she was in an altered state, probably under the influence of illegal substances. "I realize you don't know, but I love you, so I'm leaving," she said. At that moment, I realized the gravity of the situation. My wife's strange behavior was not only about cheating, but also about her involvement in something dangerous and forbidden. She quickly headed for the door to leave the room, and I followed her. I grabbed her arm and she scratched my face with her free hand. Then I wrapped both arms around her and we fell on the bed together. At that moment, I realized how much I had lost her and how little I knew about what was going on in her life. Randy came into the room with a bouquet of flowers and a bottle of wine. He saw me dominating Emily on the bed, and I completely forgot he was supposed to come in. "Please help me, this man has started hitting on me," Emily screamed. I realized that it was over for me. I was either going to be killed or badly hurt. I didn't recognize the wife who wanted to set me up. I saw Randy skillfully and quickly throw a bottle of wine in my direction, but I managed to dodge. Randy was a large and athletic man, unlike me, as I didn't go to the gym or do martial arts. But I knew a really cool move, even though I'd never used it, so I thought today was the right time for it. "You've got it all wrong. I'm her husband. I said to Randy, who was heading toward me, clearly not with friendly intentions. Randy stopped and looked at Emily. "Is that true?" he asked. At that moment, Emily, already in tears, looked at me and said confidently, "No." I was shocked at that statement. I now looked like a man who had broken into a hotel room and molested someone else's girlfriend. At this point, I realized that the situation was out of control and immediate action was necessary. Randy lunged at me again. When he was at arm's length, I used the move I had previously thought of and hit him as hard as I could right in the groin. Clearly caught him off guard. He blushed, grabbed his groin with both hands, and after a couple of seconds was lying motionless on the floor. At that moment, I realized I needed to get out of the hotel immediately. Emily was crying, and when I tried to lead her out, she resisted. I was fed up with this, so I shouted, "If you don't come with me right now, I'm going to call the police and we're going for tests. You're going to turn in your samples." As soon as she heard about the tests, her expression quickly changed and she obediently followed me out of the room. After the incident at the hotel, we first went to the hospital where Emily had to give all of her samples. They found illegal substances in her blood, so I had to leave her at the hospital. But before that, we talked. At that point, she was on an IV and was slowly coming around. I started to ask her how she got into this situation. It turned out that her lover Randy gave her something to try every time they met, but he never tried anything himself, and Emily was hooked. Emily told me that Randy is a shareholder in their company, and she met him a couple months ago. He had been courting her for a long time, but she always refused until he suggested she try something new. After that, something clicked in Emily's head, and she wanted to meet Randy every time so she could get back into that state of mind. He was giving her illegal substances, and in return, she was forced to sleep with him. Such a revelation horrified me, and frankly, I didn't believe her. Emily had already deceived me, so instead of reacting immediately, I decided to wait a couple days and went back to her hospital to have a normal conversation. She already looked better, and I could see the change in her eyes. I couldn't believe how I hadn't noticed all the changes that had happened to her before I tried to expose her. Her eyes, I thought she was just tired from work. Her nervousness, her irritability were all side effects of the illegal substances. All of her inappropriate behavior in the last few months was a result of it. She got involved with a bad person who took advantage of her. It was horrible, and I didn't know what to do in that situation. After a couple of weeks, Emily repented and admitted that she had done it out of some animal instinct and didn't even realize the extent of her actions. She was still in the hospital, rehabilitating. I wanted to file a police report against Randy to hold him accountable, but my lawyer said it was pointless. Do you think the police are more likely to believe a drug-addicted girl with no direct evidence or a successful and powerful businessman? Argued the lawyer. And he was right. We had no evidence other than Emily and Randy meeting regularly, but that wouldn't play any role in court. With that being the case, I was going to have to charge Emily with infidelity and divorce her. So I decided to leave Randy out of it, given the fact that he hadn't pursued me after the hotel altercation during which I had kicked him in the golden balls. A month later, Emily came home. She was still in rehab because she had a severe addiction, but the doctor said she could be home now. Emily stopped working and started spending all her days at home. I hesitated whether to divorce her. On the one hand, she had betrayed me, but on the other hand, she was sick and in a difficult situation. I decided not to rush things and to wait for the right time to make a decision. However, the situation only worsened over time. Emily started drinking alcohol every day and one addiction replaced the other. I realized that I was unable to handle this on my own. I was forced to inform Emily's parents, and the very next day her father came to our house. When he saw his daughter, it was hard for him to recognize her as Emily. She had lost a lot of weight because of the treatment and was barely eating, and her father yelled at her and then at me for not taking care of his daughter and putting her in such danger. A month later, Emily and I divorced and her father took her home, and I was left alone. I still blame myself for missing the most important thing. I was obsessed with catching my wife cheating and focused on gathering evidence, forgetting the most important thing. Perhaps if I had shown a little more persistence that night and had a frank conversation with her, none of this would have happened. That's the end of the story. We'd love to know what you think of this story. Please post it in the comments. Also, don't forget to put a like and subscribe to our channel not to miss new, no less interesting and exciting stories. Good luck!
Thank you so much for watching my video and your time. Please subscribe to my channel and click on the bell button. Also, I am very interested to know your personal opinion about this story. You can write it in the comments. I will definitely read it and reply to you personally.